In the previous session, we have discussed about what is research problem and what difference between the management decision problem and the management research problem. The next concept is understanding or problem identification process. How a research problem will be identified by the researcher. There are many steps which are followed in the problem identification process. We will discuss in brief about this. As I have said, first the researcher, the manager will face the decision dilemma, and he will understand the need of the research for solving his problem, his or her decision problem, that is communicated to the research organization. And once the research team visits the organization, they will follow various steps in order to come out with the research problem. Problem identification, it starts with first identification of management decision problem. First decision problem will be identified by the decision maker, and that decision problem will be communicated to the research team or research agency. Research agency will be visiting the organization which is facing the problem, and lot of activities will be carried out by the researcher. One is they discuss with the subject experts concerned to that problem situation to thoroughly understand the nature of the problem. They may also review existing literature, all the secondary sources will be identified, and thorough literature survey will be carried out by the researcher. They will also do organizational analysis. They try to gather information or data within the organization or from within the industry to thoroughly understand the nature of the problem, and then if required they also go for qualitative analysis. They may go for gathering fresh hand information from the marketplace to understand the decision problem. So these all are the 5 different tasks which are carried out by the researcher to frame the research problem. First, they will identify the management decision problem, and then they discuss with the subject experts, they review existing literature, organizational analysis, thorough organizational analysis will be carried out by the researcher. They go for qualitative research or qualitative analysis by collecting fresh hand information from the marketplace. After that, they define the research problem. Management research problem will be clearly defined by the researcher. They put the problem statement in clear operational terms. Once the research problem is formulated, then they list out various research questions. In order to solve this problem, what we have to do? List of questions will be prepared by the researcher. So those are called as research questions. So once the research questions are framed, then a research framework will be developed by the researcher. A research framework or a conceptual framework, or sometimes analytical model will also be developed by the researchers to solve the problem. So after that, clear statement of research objectives. Clearly, objectives for conducting the research will be stipulated by the researcher. After this, they may go for formulation of a research hypothesis. As I have said, hypothesis is one of the prime requirement in case of scientific research. A good research is one which clearly defines the problem and then goes for development of a working hypothesis. We have discussed in much detail what is hypothesis. In the coming sessions, again we will discuss what is a hypothesis and how formulation of research hypothesis will happen. So this is what the basic process which is followed in order to identify the research problem. We will discuss each step in brief. Like as I have said, first management decision problem will be identified. The problem recognition process, it will start with identification of the decision problem faced by the decision maker in an organization. You know, sometimes decision makers, they will be facing with some difficulty or decision dilemma. That itself is decision problem. The problem confronting the decision maker or faced by the decision maker or any challenge. It could be a challenge or it could be an opportunity. Opportunity or a challenge faced by the decision maker is nothing but the management decision problem. The broad decision problem has to be narrowed down to information oriented problem. I have said, what is information oriented problem? Information oriented problem is nothing but the research problem. Broader management decision problem must be translated into specific information oriented research problem. In order to solve the broader management problem, what research is to be carried out, what information is to be gathered, how we have to gather that information, that should be clearly specified. That itself is nothing but research problem. The broad decision problem has to be narrowed down to information oriented problem, which focuses on data or information which is to be collected, and some meaningful conclusions must be drawn out of that data. Yeah? So, this decision problem should be translated into simpler form of research questions. Research questions, that is one thing. Manager might decide to conduct the study himself or gives it to the researcher or any research agency. If the problem is simple one, with mere information collection from within the organization, if he is able to solve that problem, then it is okay. Or else if the problem is really critical one, so in that case, if he is not able to solve the problem on his or her own, then the manager or the management will hire the outside research agency for solving the problem. In most of the business situations, decision situations, the problem will be handled or the problem will be solved by using the research agency, outside research agency for solving the problem. So, I have just given you about the fundamentals of the management decision problem. So, in order to understand the decision problem, as I have said, 4 important tasks or 5 important tasks are carried out by the researcher. One is thoroughly understanding the decision problem. Second is they discuss with the subject experts. The research team will be visiting the organization and they first try to understand the nature of the decision problem faced by the decision makers. In order to thoroughly understand the nature of the problem, they discuss with the subject experts. In other words, this is also called as experience survey. Surveying the experts either within the organization, sometimes from outside the organization also. So, hence it is called as experience survey, surveying the experts or surveying the experienced people. Most of the times people with having lot of knowledge, if they know the problem, the people who have handled such situations earlier, they may come out with solution for the problem, and that is the main purpose of going for discussion with the subject experts. Experience survey. Individuals knowledgeable about the firm and the industry may help formulate the research problem. Thorough discussion will happen by the research team with the subject experts. The individuals who are highly knowledgeable about the firm or about the entire industry will be interviewed, and the nature of the problem will be understood by the researchers. These experts may be found either within the organization or outside the firm. Sometimes researchers, if the problem is declining sales, then researcher may interact with the marketing department, the marketing manager or sales manager or the key sales executives of the organization. All these people can be interacted and the nature of the problem can be thoroughly understood by the researcher. They may be either within the firm or outside the firm. Outside the firm in the sense, the marketing executives or marketing manager of other companies within the industry can also be contacted. To understand the nature of the problem, people from outside the firm can also be interacted. So, that is what experts could be either from found both inside as well as outside the firm, from within the enterprise or outside the firm within the industry. Typically, expert information is obtained by unstructured personal interview. I will just highlight what is unstructured personal interview. Structured interview is if you are following the same pattern for conducting the interview. Standard set of questions are framed and same questions are used for all the people, all the participants, and such an interview is called as structured interview. But here I am saying that in case of experience survey, unstructured personal interviews are used. Unstructured in the sense, see for example, some set of questions will be asked to the sales manager within the organization. Some different set of questions will be asked to the marketing executives of other firms within the industry. Depending upon their knowledge, depending upon their expertise, questions will vary from one participant, from one expert to the other expert. So hence it is called as unstructured personal interview. You know, sometimes the researcher feels that the outside people, outside experts, industry experts, those who have more market know-how information, they may give us more information on this, they may highlight more information on this. So more detailed interview will happen with such type of experts. Or sometimes they feel that instead of going for outside experts, we have to thoroughly investigate the company's sales executives or sales team. We may come out with the solution to the problem, or we may understand the nature of the problem thoroughly. So it all depends upon the responding capability or the information which they give to the researcher. On the basis of that, number of questions, order of questions, it will vary from one person to the other person. So hence it is called as unstructured personal interview, without administering a formal questionnaire. So in case of experience survey, formal questionnaire is not used. Formal questionnaire is a standard questionnaire will be prepared and that will be circulated to all the respondents. Such type of questionnaire is not used here. Rather, schedule is used. Schedule is interviewer or researcher will go on asking the questions verbally and note down the responses given by the participants or by the respondents. And they could be the experts from within the organization or outside the organization. So no formal questionnaire is used for collecting the information. The order in which these topics are covered and the questions to ask should not be predetermined, as I've said. So no specific order of questioning is followed, but it is not predetermined also. It is not well planned or it is not predetermined, but it is decided as the interview progresses, depending upon the responding capability, depending upon the need, depending upon the availability of information, the number of questions, type of question, it will vary from one expert to the other expert. So this is all about experience survey. Next step is, once they conduct this type of experience survey, they go for reviewing existing literature. This is one of the best source of understanding the nature of the problem. Reviewing existing literature, or it is called as secondary data analysis. Available data is nothing but secondary data. The data which is already available, which is collected by somebody else for some other purpose some time ago, is called as secondary data. So always researchers, what they do is they collect this secondary data from different sources. Literature review is a comprehensive collection of information obtained from published and unpublished sources. Published sources or unpublished sources on a specific area of interest to the researcher. This data is called as secondary data. In simple language, the available data, already existing data, which is collected by somebody else for some other purpose some time ago to solve some problem. Such data is called as secondary data, and always it is a good practice by the researcher. They first go for collecting the secondary data. If the available secondary data is sufficient to understand the nature of the problem, then they will not go for primary data collection, because primary data collection is a costlier affair. It is expensive compared to the secondary data. Primary data is nothing but collecting fresh hand information from the marketplace. So it is expensive, hiring interviewer, collecting the data, lodging charges, boarding charges, etc. So taking prior appointment of the participants in case of primary data. So this is all very expensive. So hence the researcher, they first go for secondary data analysis. They thoroughly review the existing literature. The literature could be which includes journals, articles from the journals, newspapers, magazines, government reports. There are many reports published by the government, and even trade publications will be there. Trade publications, published reports, and what do you call, computerized databases. You know, sometimes nowadays we are getting information from the www as well, from the websites, in encyclopedia, Wikipedia, blogs, etc. All this information can be gathered for understanding the nature of the problem. So after this, analysis of available secondary data will be done by the researcher. This is very essential step in the problem definition process. Collecting the secondary data and thorough analysis of the secondary data will be made in order to understand the nature of the problem. If this secondary data is not adequate or if it is not sufficient, then researcher will go for primary data collection. Primary data should not be collected until the available secondary data have been fully analyzed. So always it is a good practice to first go for secondary data, whether it could be academic research or any business research. First always we should go for collecting the secondary data. If available secondary data is not sufficient to solve the research problem, then we have to go for primary data collection. So first task is they will try to understand the decision problem, and then in order to thoroughly understand the decision problem, they discuss with the industry experts, that is what called as experience survey. Then the second step is they will go for reviewing the existing literature. So once the secondary data analysis is made, then next step to dig deeper into the research, the management decision problem, they go for doing this, which is called as organizational analysis. Organizational analysis is nothing but, this is another significant source of deriving the research problem, is industry and organizational data, collecting industry data and organizational data. For example, as I've said, if the problem faced by the decision maker is declining sales, then the sales data, sales information from different areas will be gathered. In case the researcher or investigator is manager himself or herself, data might be available easily. From within the premises, data is readily available, and that data is of great use to the researcher for understanding the nature of the problem. This data needs to include organizational demographics, like what is the origin of the company, history of the firm, size of the firm, what are the assets of the firm, nature of business, where the business is located, what all resources are being used, the philosophy and policies of the management, strategies of the management, or else detailed organizational structure. What is the organizational structure, who will be reporting to whom, etc. So depending upon the nature of the problem, all this data will be analyzed thoroughly by the researcher. One best example I just quoted you, if the problem faced by the decision maker is declining sales, then sales data from different sources will be gathered. So marketing manager will be contacted, the sales reports will be generated, sales reports will be analyzed thoroughly, 1 year sales, 2 year sales or previous 6 months sales will be taken into consideration, thorough analysis is made. What is the sales for the present period, sales for the previous quarter, sales for 1 year, or historical sales records of 4 to 5 years will be taken into consideration, and thorough analysis will be made. From that literature itself, from those collected information only, the researcher is able to understand how is the sales trend, why it is declining. So that will be understood by the researcher. So this is all called as organizational analysis. So first thing is the researcher will identify the decision problem, and then he or she will discuss with the industry experts, which is called as experience survey. Then after that, review of literature will be done, and then organizational analysis will also be carried out. With the information obtained from all these sources is not sufficient, then the researcher will go for this type of research, which is called as qualitative research. Information obtained from the organization, industry experts and secondary data, if they are not sufficient to define the research problem, then the researcher has to go for this type of research, which is called as qualitative research. Qualitative research is nothing but they collect the data fresh hand from the field or from the marketplace. Like if the problem is declining sales. If the researcher is not in a position to understand from the sales records of the company, or if he is not able to understand the nature of the problem after surveying or after conducting the survey of experts from within the company or from outside the company, then he or she will go for collecting information from the customers only. Sample set of respondents will be chosen. They will be surveyed thoroughly to understand the reason behind declining sales. So that is what called as qualitative research. Sometimes qualitative research must be undertaken to gain an understanding of the problem and its underlying factors. Available sales records may not solve that problem, or he is not in a position to understand the reasons behind that problem. So in that case, he or she, the researcher, will go for conducting a qualitative research. Sample set of respondents will be chosen and actual field study will be carried out to know reasons behind declining sales. Qualitative research is mostly unstructured. It will not follow a proper structure. It varies from situation to situation, from person to person. Such a type of research is called as unstructured research. If the pattern of questions or the techniques used vary from one person, one participant to other participant, then such as research is called as unstructured research. Qualitative research is also unstructured. You know, sometimes one customer may give some set of information. Other customer, he is more experienced. If he puts more, if he expresses more views on about the quality of the product or why they are not buying, what are the reasons behind declining sales, then more information will be extracted from such type of respondents. So hence, qualitative research is unstructured. It is mostly exploratory in nature. It is basically carried out to explore the nature of the problem. The agenda here is not to test the hypothesis, only to explore the problem situation. Such a study will be carried out, and it is based on small samples. Small samples will be chosen for understanding the nature of the problem, and it may utilize popular qualitative techniques also. You know, when we talk about qualitative research, there are different techniques which are used for collecting the information. Qualitative research, in previous sessions we have discussed what it is. It aims at collecting qualitative data, the data which cannot be quantified. Hidden feelings of the customer, inner feelings of the customer. It could be satisfaction, perception, attitude, opinion, etc. So such type of information will be gathered. The various techniques used in qualitative techniques are focus group discussions. Focus group discussions are nothing but some 8 to 10 people will be called and they will be given a topic for discussion. The discussion will happen. The interviewer will be just sitting and observing the discussion of the team. He will just go on noting down the points and he will draw conclusion out of that. That is what called as group discussion or focus groups. Focus groups will be called, or word association technique. There are different projective techniques. Word association techniques are also called as projective techniques. If the respondent is not revealing directly the information when we ask the question, then there are some indirect methods of collecting the information, like word association. List of words will be given to the respondents and they will be asked to pick a word which first comes to their mind. That is what called as word association technique. Like for example, if I want to know that whether people are willing to buy car or not, some list of 10 to 15 words will be given to them. In that, my test word car will be introduced. Pen, mobile, cycle, camera, etc. So in that, car word will also be included. If a person immediately expresses, or if the word car comes to his mouth first, then we can assume that he has something, some plan about this particular product. So that is what the understanding from the research point of view. So there are many such projective techniques which are used. One is word association test, sentence completion test, etc. So those all things we will discuss in primary data collection chapter. Depth interviews will also be collected. Depth interview is the interview which will last more than 30 minutes. So depending upon the responding capability of the participants, deeper questions or probing questions will be asked and more detailed information will be extracted. It is one-to-one interviews that probe the respondents' thoughts in detail. So these all are the various techniques which are used by the researcher to understand the nature of the problem. Other exploratory research techniques such as pilot surveys. Pilot survey is nothing but on small basis. So initially few set of sample respondents will be chosen and information is extracted. Case studies, 1 or 2 cases will be taken and thorough investigation of such cases. 1 or 2 sample customers will be taken and detailed description, detailed thorough analysis will be made of such cases. So all such type of techniques can also be used to gain insights into the phenomena of interest by the researcher. So this is all about the 4th step. So these all are the 5 different tasks which are used by the researcher to understand the nature of the research problem. Once all these 5 steps are carried out, then the researcher will go for defining the research problem in clear, operational terms. So that is what this stage. Once the secondary and primary research is over, the researcher is to focus and define the issues of concern, the need to be investigated further. What is the main issue faced by the decision maker? What information is to be gathered? And in the form of an unambiguous and clearly defined research problem, a very clear definition of the problem without any confusion. In a precise way, research problem will be stated. In other words, researcher will define the problem in clear operational terms. What exactly is the issue, what information we have to gather, and from whom we have to gather the information, and in what period we have to collect this information. So that is clearly defined in terms of research problem. The researcher has to identify and then refine the most probable cause of the problem and formalize it as a research problem. This would be achieved through 5 preliminary stages. Already I have discussed what all are the 5 preliminary stages. First is understanding the decision problem, then discussion with the experts, then going for literature review, and then secondary analysis will be done, then the qualitative research will be conducted. Qualitative organizational study will be carried out and qualitative research will be conducted. So all these 5 preliminary investigative steps will be followed in order to define the research problem. So the research problem has to be clearly defined in operational terms, which includes the various variables under the study. We will discuss what all are the various components of the research problem in detail in the further sessions. Now after this, the next step is the researcher. Once the researcher defines the the management research problem clearly, then he or she has to lay down theoretical foundation or model building. Usually in academic research studies also we do this. Once we define our research problem, then we come out with a model, a framework, a conceptual framework. Thorough review of literature will be made and existing concepts will be taken into consideration, and we come out with a new model which we frame. That is what called as a theoretical foundation or model building. A model will be built by the researcher. Having identified and defined the variables under the study, the next step is to try and form the theoretical framework for the research. It is nothing but a schema which will be developed by the researcher, or network of probable relationship between the identified variables. So it will clearly specify what are the various variables under study. There are different variables. Again, we will discuss what all are the variables: independent variable, dependent variable, what relationship we want to identify between independent and dependent variable. Everything will be clearly specified in the form of a schema or a network of probable relationship. That itself is called as the theoretical framework or model for the research. So this step, however, is not mandatory for all the type of research studies. Sometimes the objective of the research is to explore only the probable variables. We are not aiming at finding the association between the variables. So it is not mandatory or it is not compulsory to come out with some framework or model for conducting the research. But mostly in all scientific research studies, the researcher will frame a framework or theoretical foundation or model will be built, and on that model, on the basis of that model, further research steps will be carried out. So once the model is prepared, then the next step is statement of research objectives. Clearly, the researcher has to lay down the objectives of the research. Research questions must be formulated on the basis of research problem. Research questions. Research problem will be converted into investigative questions. Those investigative questions are nothing but research question. Research questions will be formulated. Research questions that were formulated need to be broken down into objectives. For one research question, there could be one objective or more than one objective. For each research question, the researcher has to formulate research objectives. This section makes active use of verbs such as to find out, to determine, to establish, to measure. So clearly we have to define the objectives. For example, if the research question framed by the researcher is to know the reasons behind declining sales, then objectives could be to know or to find out. If the research problem is declining sales, objectives could be to know the reasons behind declining sales, or to know the association between the advertising and sales of the company's product, or to know the relationship between the quality of the product and sales of the product, or to know the relationship between income of the people and sales of the product. So, in that way research question will lead to one or two research objectives. So, research objectives will be laid down the researcher. In certain cases, the main objective of the study will be broken down into sub objectives. The main objective of the research is to know the underlying causes of the declining sales. Apart from that, there could be some other secondary objectives also, like what all are, whether demographic factors are also leading to the declining sales, like income of the people, education of the people, occupation of the people, those all are called as secondary objectives. So, usually in any type of research study, they first define the primary objectives and then the secondary objectives, main objectives and the remaining objectives. So, objectives will also be specified into different categories. Then after framing the research objectives, the last step in identification process is formulation of research hypothesis. Of course, this particular concept we will discuss in detail as a separate heading, but let me highlight you what is hypothesis. So, first researcher will understand the decision problem, convert that decision problem into research problem. For each, the research problem will be stated as research questions, and for each research question objectives will be laid down, and once after framing or formulation of research objectives, hypothesis will be written by the researcher. So, hypothesis is nothing but it is a proposition made by the researcher, or it could be assumed solution for the research problem. So, every good research, it will start with formulation of research hypothesis. In further steps, this formulated hypothesis will be tested through data analysis, that we will discuss later. The problem identification process, it ends with hypothesis formulation stage. And hypothesis is nothing but any assumption that the researcher makes on the probable direction of the results that might be obtained on completion of the research process is termed as hypothesis, or it could be a proposition made by the researcher, or it is an assumed solution for the research problem that will be stated in clear terms. Unlike the research problem that generally takes on a question form, hypothesis it will be in a sentence form. Hypothesis will be written in a sentence form. The statements that must be thus made can be empirically tested. Like for example, if the research problem faced by the organization is declining sales, hypothesis will be stated in this way: sales are declining because of poor quality of the product. This could be an hypothesis. Or sales are declining because of the poor advertising activities or inefficient advertising activities of the firm. This is second hypothesis. So, hypothesis will be written in a sentence form, or it will be written in a phrase. So, this is all about the problem identification process. Thank you.